a very important time in our history. There was a lot of legitimate fear at the time, and it was the day I received a draft notice. I was still in my medical training. It was 1962. It was in October. And I'm sure all you who are interested in history know exactly what happened on October 1962. And that was where there was the missile crisis in Cuba. And the Soviets were practically at their peak. They had 30,000 nuclear weapons and missiles that could be delivered here, and they parked them down there in Cuba. And they're on the verge, we are on the verge of having a nuclear confrontation. But at that time, Kennedy had at least the wisdom to call up Khrushchev before the war got going. And Khrushchev just said to him, he says, look, you have missiles in Turkey pointing at us, and that's on our borders. And Kennedy says, oh, yeah, I understand that. So he said, what can we do? Well, you take them out of Turkey, we'll take them out of Cuba. Thank goodness for that. You know, I mean, we didn't need those missiles from Turkey. So we didn't have it. The Soviet system collapsed for predictable reasons. They had an economic system that was deeply flawed, and they had this silly notion that they could expand their empire and go in and occupy Afghanistan. Can you imagine how silly that notion was? So here we are, we're bankrupt, no money at all, a lot of inflation, a weak economy, no production. So what are we doing? We're looking for another war. We're in Iraq, we're in Pakistan, we're in Afghanistan, we're in Libya now, we're very much involved in Egypt, passing out money that we don't have. We've already started and moving towards Syria, and there is already a confrontation with the people of Iran, which makes no sense whatsoever. Once again, the fear is being built up. They're telling you that the Iranians are about to attack us with a nuclear weapon. About to attack us with a nuclear weapon that they don't have. In our CIA, the United Nations, they don't even claim that they have it. And they're getting everybody ready and geared up to go into another war. Make them explain it to you. And if I am your president, I will explain it to you, and I'll tell you there's probably no need to start another war. Yeah. The president does have, and it's an ominous responsibility, and that is to defend this country, to be in charge of the military. In the debates, it was very clear that if our country is under attack or there's an imminent attack, the president has to act. That is a responsibility. He can't wait until the Congress comes together. In the old days, they got together rather slowly, so the president had to have this authority. But to go to war was to be a constitutional responsibility. There had to be a declaration of war. And I think if we'd have only followed that, we would have been so much less involved. And we wouldn't be going carelessly as we have been for these so many years. Since World War II, there's never been a declared war. And look at the problems that we've had. This idea that we're about to end in Iraq, it's not true. You know, they said there are 8,000 Army people going to be taken out of the active forces. Well, they're adding 17,000 contractors into the embassy in Baghdad. You know, we're really leaving, and yet we have an embassy almost as big as the Vatican, the biggest in the world. And they're going to spend about $1 billion, and we're going to put 17,000 Americans in this country that we say that we're not going to be involved in. Just building up fear and distortion, and this whole thing that Iran might attack us with a weapon they don't have. They have all this oil, and they're selling it, and they're holding in there against all the sanctions we put on them. At the same time, they have to import gasoline. They don't even make enough gasoline. They can't even refine gasoline enough for themselves. And here we're supposed to be intimidated and fearful and be able to go blindly into war. This is where I say we shouldn't be so intimidated and so weak as to say that we're not allowed to talk to people. I think sometimes talking requires more strength than just being intimidated and dropping bombs on people. Reasons why I've talked about monetary policy so long has been that the threat to liberty is big government. if you have big government to fight endless wars overseas, or big government to run a welfare system that always fails, it undermines the people, it undermines the production, it undermines your liberties, just as we see is happening today, with the Patriot Act and other things, this whole idea of what that they just passed in the Senate and they're getting ready to pass in the House, this whole idea that the war on terrorism is against all of us, the battleground is America, that military law can be imposed, American citizens can be captured and put in prison, including Guantanamo, and denied a lawyer. That's what's on the books. And it looks like it's going to pass. So we are not getting more free. We are getting less free. Now, the way the Federal Reserve works into this is when government grows, so you have to stop the growth of government. It'd be good if we just had enough people there quit spending the money. Or a president who would veto every single bill. That might help too. If our government couldn't borrow money and couldn't print money and they had to pay for everything they do by direct taxation, government wouldn't grow. Everybody would know exactly how big the government is growing. Also, something that would help about, to get the people's attention is repeal withholding. If you can't get rid of the taxes, repeal withholding. What if every American knew exactly how much tax they paid every week? They had to write a check to the government. All of a sudden, this thing would end rather quickly, and people would be outraged on how much taxes they pay. But because we facilitated, Jefferson argued that the government shouldn't be able to borrow money, but that didn't pass, and our government is permitted under the Constitution to borrow money, but they did not give the authority to do the next step. If you can't tax enough, you can't borrow enough, well, create a Federal Reserve System that just prints the money. And that is what happens. So because they can do that and you don't see the consequence right away and it's delayed and you can't find exactly who suffers the most, like some people benefit and some people suffer, what it does, it causes government to grow, and the bigger the government grows, the worse our liberties are, the worse our economy is. So we have to address foreign policy, monetary policy, domestic economic policy, tax policy, regulatory policy, if we want to restore a prosperous, free society. And that should be our goal. If we just provide the right environment, the burden does not fall on the president or the Congress to decide what you want to do with your life, what you want to do with your money, or what foreigners want to do with their government. It would be something that would come about differently, but you have to provide the right environment. And that was the genius of the founders. They provided the right environment. They knew and understood what sound money meant. They knew and understood what free markets meant, what property rights meant, what contracts meant, and the rest was left up to the people. So tragically, I believe, is what's happened over this last 100 years is we've lost our understanding and our confidence how a free society works. And that is going to be the burden placed on your shoulders to find out and understand exactly how freedom works, why it's a benefit, where the shortcomings are, and to expect them and how you compensate for them, but not to throw up your hands and say, well, what's the government going to do? How is the government going to take care of me? Well, we know what they did when they decided everybody wanted a house. Yeah, they had a housing program and they printed a lot of money. And guess what? A few people went bankrupt, they got bailed out, the middle class lost their jobs and they lost their houses. It doesn't work. So when the government gets involved, it's pretty